A brawl broke out in Sierra Leone's parliament Wednesday as lawmakers debated a proposed change to the electoral system to allow for proportional representation in next year's election. Representatives from the ruling Sierra Leone People's Party and the opposition All People's Congress Party were seen swinging punches and throwing chairs in video footage. The West African nation's Electoral Commission has recommended switching to a proportional representation system for the June 2023 local and parliamentary elections set for the same day as the presidential ballot. The opposition is opposed to the move, but the government is in favor of the plan, which requires parliamentary approval. Following the fight, some members of the parliamentary were allegedly thrown out of the chamber by security. The June vote will see President Julius Bio, who was first elected in 2018, contest a second term in office. Last week, lawmakers passed legislation to introduce a gender quota in all elected and appointed positions ahead of next year's election, which had been a major campaign promise by the president in 2018. Let's talk this through by speaking with Sierra Leone's former Minister of Social Welfare, Gender and Children's Welfare, Dr. Sylvia Blyden. Thank you so much for joining us on the news this time. Talk to us about what more do we know about this brawl among the lawmakers in the parliament in Sierra Leone? What exactly happened?
I would have to appeal to you to raise the volume up a little bit more. It's quite low. I can barely hear what you're saying. If you can raise the volume a little bit more, please.
All right, that is noted. But let me confirm whether you got my question.
I didn't.
Okay, so I was trying to find out exactly what happened, what transpired in the Sierra Leonean parliament this past day.
What transpired is actually a microcosm of a much bigger problem than just a brawl in parliament. What we have in Sierra Leone is a crisis. It's a crisis with our democracy. And by that I mean our democracy would function if the executive arm of government and the parliamentary arm of government works according to the Constitution, which is basically the executive arm, which is led by His Excellency the President, should not do anything that has a legal implication unless they get permission from the parliament. Now, one of the ways the Constitution ensures that this happens is to have the parliament only listen to a document brought by the executive arm of government, that's the arm led by the president, if it is first made public to the general public. In other words, if it is published in the government gazette. Now, what happened in Sierra Leone and what has been happening recently is that the executive arm of government does not follow procedures. They do not follow processes. So in this case, they did not publish to the general public these documents for proportional representation. And these are documents that are going to affect the entire Sierra Leone populace in the elections next year. So you would imagine that this is not a document that you should play games with. But you had an executive arm of government, the Attorney General, took papers to Parliament that he had not publicized to the general public. Secondly, you have a Parliament which unfortunately is compromised. What do I mean by the Parliament is compromised? The leadership of the Parliament, including even the leadership of the opposition, is heavily compromised. So unfortunately for Sierra Leone's democracy, what happened in Parliament is a situation where the leader of the opposition ensured he was not in the Parliament on that day because he knew that the procedures were wrong. He knew that those materials had not been gazetted, and he flew out of the country. He went to Nigeria. He said he had an ECOWAS meeting in Nigeria. So he left people in Parliament who are members of Parliament who did not have the leadership skills to communicate. Their leader was not around. because he is compromised. He's now in Nigeria, he's now attending an ECOWAS meeting, and I can say this on record that he's compromised. Because what we have in Sierra Leone is a situation where the parliament is supposed to be so powerful that the executive arm of government cannot override parliamentary procedures. But this is happening all the time. The executive forces their way through because the leadership in the parliament is compromised. I can tell you for free that there is a report. Let me just hit on this. There is a report by the executive arm of government indicting leaders of the parliament in acts of corruption. And so when you have a situation like this, you cannot have an effective parliament. So if the leader of the opposition in parliament is named and shamed as being culpable for investigations for corruption, he's not going to be effective. He's not going to be efficient. So he runs away. He leaves the country. And the young parliamentarians he leaves behind, they are frustrated. They are upset. This document has not been gazetted. Procedures have not been followed. And so the only way they could express themselves was violently. But this is a microcosm of a bigger problem that ECOWAS and the entire world needs to look into.
Right.
What is happening in Sierra Leone is not just a parliamentary brawl. It's a serious assault on our democratic credentials.
Well, so many issues you have actually raised there. But looking at the issue of violence that actually ensued in the parliament, is it actually a commonplace to find lawmakers engage in physical violence to drive home their demand?
This happens all over the world. It's not unique. I'm sure it has happened in Nigeria before, where parliamentarians, they go into parliament, they're supposed to debate issues. They're supposed to use their voices and debate issues. And it has happened all over the world. Even in some of the most civilized Western democracies, there are parliamentary brawls. But what is happening in Sierra Leone, it is an expression of an inability for them to democratically debate. They find themselves in a situation where they believe they no longer have a voice to debate, so they have to fight. They have to draw attention by being violent. I condemn it. It's totally not accepted for members of parliament to become violent. But then when you look at the bigger picture, we have a situation where our democracy is under threat. Sierra Leone, like Nigeria, has a hybrid system. The executive arm of government is supposed to be under the oversight of the parliamentary arm of government. But when you have a parliamentary arm of government that is compromised, that is under blackmail, that cannot function, the leadership is named and shamed as being part of corrupt practices. So they cannot do oversight of the executive arm. And these young members of parliament, they are not compromised, but they don't have leadership. So the only option for them is fight, be violent and draw attention. Let's be aggressive and draw attention. And it's most unfortunate, the amount of aggression. The world needs to pay attention to what is happening.
Right.
What happened is bigger than a parliamentary brawl. It's an indictment on our democratic credentials.
Well, no one can say exactly whether violence will definitely get some of these issues, to make them drive home their demands. But then let's talk about gender parity, because talking about gender quota in all elected and appointed positions had actually been a major campaign promise by the President Bill in 2018. So why has this been an issue for it to sail through?
Why has this been an issue for
gender parity to be achieved in Sierra Leone, following the 30% that was actually passed in just last week?
Yes. First of all, that's great news. I was the minister responsible for gender affairs, and this is something that started under my tenure, development of this bill. It started when I was the minister, and I'm very, very happy that this current government, we have to give credit to the president and his executive. They really pushed this through, and I'm not sure how easy it is going to be to implement it, because when I was the minister, I knew there were bottlenecks. The bill has been passed. It's great news for us, the women, because it's an affirmative action bill. It's a bill that's going to ensure that women can get an advantage over men in getting into elective offices. It's a way of bringing more women on board and trying to get this gender parity. But there are going to be bottlenecks, but I hope we can overcome them. But overall, it's a very good news for the women of Sierra Leone. Last night, a bunch of us women were at a celebration and awards night where the president and his wife, they were awarded. But I just hope we will be able to implement it. I belong to the opposition. I'm a member of the opposition. When my party was in government, we started the development of this bill. We were not able to complete it. The current president has completed it, and we just hope that they can implement it as it looks on paper.
Actually, according to data, according to the Women's Political Participation, it said that 24% of the 12,113 parliamentarians in Africa, just 25% of them are just women. But then it's just so one cannot be so sure whether the women folks would definitely represent because there's one thing for it to be passed, another thing for people to also support the women rather, to get into parliament. I hope this can be done at the end of the day in Sierra Leone, looking at what the women folks are actually, striving for. Just in less than a minute, quickly.
If I get you correctly, you are saying the average across board in Africa is 25% or less than 25%. Well, in Sierra Leone, it is so low, it is embarrassing to say what it is, but it is definitely less than 15%. So the 15% women who are members of parliament, it's quite low. It's an embarrassingly low number. And that's why we have been pushing to try to get more women into parliament.
Yeah.
I have served as a cabinet minister responsible for women's advancement. So I know how effective women can be when they're given positions of authority. And there is a wind of change across Sierra Leone, a lot more. I have presidential ambitions, I have to say. I want to be president of Sierra Leone one day. And I can assure you that if I'm president of Sierra Leone, I will not have a situation where members of parliament would go into a brawl, because I would ensure we have a democratic system of government. Now, I would want to be president of Sierra Leone one day. There are other women who also want to be president of Sierra Leone one day. And there's a wind of change that's blowing across the land. More and more people are asking for women to be empowered. And I believe this gender equality bill is the first step towards ensuring that a lot of us can eventually have our ambitions come to fruition.
Well, we look forward to seeing you, contesting for the position of the president. But currently, we've got 19 of the Sierra Leonean lawmakers, are actually 19 out of the 146. We'll say thank you to the Sierra Leone's former Minister of Social Welfare, Gender and Children's Welfare, Dr. Sylvia Blyden. Thank you so much for your time on World Now.
Thank you for having me too. It's been a pleasure.